I'm very glad to have you here in our series of videocasts from Wisdom. I'm Dirk, the Executive Director of Wisdom. Wisdom is a nonprofit which is called Women in Science, Demonstrating Outstanding Merits. And I'm very happy to have you here, Dr. Sherri Bassner. So you are a scientist, and we definitely want to share with our audience where you're coming from, what the obstacles are or have been that you faced, and where you're heading to. I think this will be a very exciting discussion about your past and also the future. I also read your blog post, and I will refer to that later, which is really an exciting piece.
Okay.
Honestly, I was very moved by that, but I don't want to take too much away already up front. So, Sherri, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Dirk, first, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this videocast series. You know, I think the work that Wisdom is doing is not only great work, it's very important work. And I'm honored to be able to play a role and hopefully help the young women that are reaching out to Wisdom for assistance and do whatever I can to support your efforts. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Sherri Bassner. I'm a chemist by training. But as you'll hear throughout my career, I've done a lot of things that maybe weren't directly connected to chemistry. And that is not only okay, it was great, and it was a nice surprise. And that's part of some of the things we'll talk about when we talk about career progression. I chose an undergraduate degree in chemistry at Goucher College in Baltimore, went to graduate school for inorganic chemistry, PhD in inorganic chemistry at Penn State. I spent 22 years with Air Products and Chemicals in a succession of roles from a bench chemist in R&D through technology management and R&D directorship, and then moved to a company called Intertech, where I had the chance to take on a business management role, so expanding outside of R&D and outside of a strict focus on chemistry and chemical development into all aspects of managing a business. I retired a few years ago. I try to stay active in continuing to coach and develop particularly young women in science, which is something that's always been very important to me. And I also, as Dirk referred to, write a blog kind of capturing some of the lessons on leadership that I've learned throughout my career. So that's the nickel tour.
Thank you so much. That's very interesting. And also what you were referring to already, that you started out as a chemist and thought perhaps to be a chemist at the bench, and then things changed. I think that's something that a lot of chemists honestly experience. And I'm a chemist myself, but also not working on the bench anymore. Also took on some management roles in my career. And I think that's a very interesting path. So, but let's start with the past first. So you started to study chemistry. What really sparked your interest in science in general, and when did that happen?
Yeah, you know, I think like a lot of people that have gone into the sciences, I can't point to a specific moment when I suddenly discovered I love science. It was just kind of always there. And you know, I did have a strong influence growing up. My mom is also a chemist. Although interestingly, she didn't tell me that she had originally majored in chemistry in college until after I had already declared my major. I think she wanted to not overly influence me.
Which is great.
But certainly my parents always encouraged me to follow my interests. My first memory of being fascinated by science was in sixth grade when we dissected frogs. And I remember spending hours and hours just picking this thing apart and looking at everything inside and just thinking how incredibly fascinating it was. And then my high school chemistry teacher, this is something I think also a lot of people can point to, is a very influential teacher at various points in their education. My high school chemistry teacher took a real interest in me, spent a lot of extra time with me, nurtured my interest, and even created a third year of high school chemistry for me to take when I wanted to keep on going with my studies before I went to college.
That's very interesting. So that means you are a very curious person, isn't it?
I am.
And I think that's so important for everything that we do. Curiosity, not only for exploring sciences, but also to become a good manager, because you have to be curious about your staff, curious about the customers, and we might come later to that. So curiosity definitely was fostered by your parents. So that seemed to be the first important step, but then also by the teacher.
Yeah.
And something I recently read about that your brain, if it is in a curious state, remembers things much better than if you are not in a curious state. Therefore, we learn so much better when a teacher understands to ignite the spark of curiosity.
Mm.
My chemistry teacher was similar. My French teacher was not. And here we go.
Yeah, that's
so,
great.
so yeah, so this is really very interesting what you're telling us. And obviously also in your family, there was this interest in natural science. But some others even developed that on their own. And as I said, just being so curious when you wanted to dissect everything and understand life around you, obviously, that's very interesting, similar to what I have experienced.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Just having a fundamental curiosity about the world around you is just sort of the baseline in becoming a good scientist.
And then when you became a scientist, you said you went to Penn State, and so you envisioned your career to be probably very different to what you have experienced now, looking back. So you thought you might invent new drugs or understand life better and do that forever, probably. Or what was your mindset at the time?
Well, Dirk, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I had no idea what my career could even possibly look like, and this is not really anything against the teachers that I had in school, but because their experiences were predominantly or exclusively academic, they didn't really know exactly how to guide me about what the possibilities were either. So I just started taking it one step at a time. I went to graduate school because I knew I wanted to learn more, and I was enjoying the academic pursuit of knowledge, and I was guided by my the high school chemistry or the college chemistry professor that I was closest to, that I would have a broader range of opportunities if I got my PhD. And she thought I was fully capable, so she encouraged me to go. It's like, all right, that's the next step. When I was in graduate school, obviously there's two pathways that your advisors can guide you towards, two main pathways.
Mm-hmm.
One is to follow a pathway towards an academic professorship. I'd have to edit that one out. And the other is to consider a career as an industrial scientist. They could tell me a lot more about careers in academia, what it meant to be a research professor versus a teaching professor, what life was like at a large university versus a smaller school. But to be perfectly honest, there wasn't a lot of guidance around what the possibilities were in industrial science. My impression was that I would be a bench chemist, and maybe at some point in my career, manage or guide other bench chemists the way, say, a postdoc might guide an incoming graduate student. But I really had no sense of what the range of opportunities were open to me or what I might even be interested in. So my first choice was academia or industry. And I gravitated towards industry because I've always been more driven by practical applications of scientific knowledge. Doesn't mean that's not possible within an academic environment, but I felt I'd be able to pursue it more directly in an industrial environment. And so that's how I took that next step. Once I got into industry, then I started to see people that had my background, what were the roles that they held, what were the sorts of jobs that they could do, and started to learn about what those different jobs were, what the skills were required, whether I might like it or not. And that's when my career started to move in different directions.
Very interesting what you said. You had no idea in the very beginning what the plethora of opportunities are. And the same is what I experienced. I also thought I will be a bench chemist forever, and nobody told me about all these opportunities. And for me, it was clear also to go to university to become eventually a professor, because that was the only thing I always heard. Not seeing all these opportunities, nobody even spoke to me about this industrial application at the time. So that's something that at least somebody told you. So I hope that this video cast really helps for the audience to understand already now that there are so many opportunities out there for a scientist or a chemist specifically, and they
Yeah,
seem endless.
I agree, and I also want to make sure that young people, young women especially, that are just starting out in their education, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know, or even it's better if you don't plan out every step along the way until you hit retirement. Just keep doing things that are fun and interesting and keep yourself open to other possibilities. You'll figure it out as you go.
So absolutely. So be passionate about what you do and enjoy it every day to go to work. I think that that really is the key message here.
Mm-hmm.
Then it automatically will develop because you are probably then really excelling of what you're doing and others see that and then they promote you along the way.
Absolutely.
And that's really exciting to hear that. So and when you then wanted to take the step away from academia and went into industry as a woman in science, did you specifically feel that there are issues or was it difficult at the time that you wanted to do the step?
You know, I've been thinking about that because I knew that we would certainly touch on that topic. And just to kind of orient the people who might be watching this video, I got my PhD in 1988. So it's been a while. I think that the environment in both academia and in industry has certainly changed over the past 30-something years. At the time that I first came out of graduate school, things were really just starting to open up for women, particularly at the PhD level in industrial science. And honestly, probably also in academia. I was only the third female that had ever been in my advisor's research group. There were several that had, by the time I graduated, there were already more than 3 more, so things were opening up quickly. And when I first started in my industrial role, there were very few women in R&D and on the technical ladder that were senior to me, and most of them were just a year or 2 older than me. So there was still a lot of groundbreaking and ceiling breaking that needed to happen, even in the early parts of my career. Now, I was aware that I was one of just a few women. Mm-hmm. But I truly was not, at least at the time, consciously aware of any overt sexism or any purposeful inequities that may have happened that held me back. I just did what I felt I needed to do. Now, I look back on those early years and realized that the playing field was certainly not level. That opportunities were not available to me that were available to my male colleagues, that there was unintentional bias that people just weren't even aware that they were expressing. So I know now it was there. I didn't really feel it then. I didn't really feel that things were not open to me. And I know that I just continued to push forward. Now, could I have achieved more or different if I had been more conscious of those instances of bias or those micro inequities? Maybe. But I think the most important thing was I just kept trying to move forward, to do more, to do as good a job as I could at what I was asked to do, to ask for opportunities, to push forward. And that's really where reaching out for mentors is extremely important, and that helped me every step along my career.
So how did you reach out to mentors? Because that's something big also for us as Wisdom. We want to provide mentorship programs. So how did you do that actively?
Yeah, you know, again, early on, it wasn't conscious at all. I just recognized that there was a lot that I didn't know. And I think I also unconsciously realized there was a lot that I didn't even know that I didn't know. And I've never really been hesitant to ask people's advice and opinion. And I just would start talking and getting to know people around me. They may have been my peers. They may have been slightly above me in the ladder. They may have been significantly above me in the ladder. I think I just instinctively knew to get to know people that knew things that I didn't. And hopefully I did it in a way that didn't waste their time, because that's probably one of the most important lessons people need to learn. If you're going to reach out for mentorship, You need to do your homework and make sure that you're always prepared and that you don't waste people's time, and they will be more than willing to help you. As my career progressed, I got much more purposeful about it. I started to understand, okay, this is an opportunity I would like to be considered for. And when I look at the skill sets required or the experiences required to be successful in that role, these are the gaps that I have. Who can help me fill in those gaps? And so I started to be much more purposeful. Honestly, when you ask somebody for help, somebody more senior, because over time the tables turned and people reached out to me as a mentor, it's really flattering when somebody asks you for your input, for your advice, for your perspective. Most people are very willing to give it, as long as you approach the relationship in a very authentic way, that you're not just trying to get something from them, that it's an important relationship to you.
Absolutely. So key message here for me is also don't be shy to ask for help, because sometimes people are a little bit shy of, oh, can I really ask for help? But you are saying, don't be shy, just be authentic, address the question that you have to the right people. That sounds like a recipe for success. And that's what I've seen as well.
Yeah.
Any networks that you purposefully went into, or groups or something like that? Or
gosh, there were, I guess, certainly many informal networks, right? The other female PhDs in R&D, we hung out together. We shared stories. We helped each other out. That just happened organically. There were industry groups that I got engaged with. When I was at the bench, I spent most of my bench career developing new materials that went into industrial paints and coatings. And so there were many external societies that were associated with the paint and coatings industry. And I engaged with several of those and developed long-standing networks through that. Now, again, if you have that mindset of there's always some things that I don't know, and every person I meet can teach me something new, you're going to naturally develop networks. I think it's good to be purposeful about it in certain instances, when it comes to things like industry networks, or if you're in a larger company, they have employee affinity groups where you can get with other women scientists or people with a certain career interest or other backgrounds. The more that you can meet with people that can teach you something that you don't know, and that gives you the opportunity to give back and do the same for them, the stronger you'll be.
Very good. And thank you very much, Sherri. And Sherri, you also developed into various management roles. So you became a leader. And yesterday I was talking to somebody else, nothing regarding wisdom here, but he was also a manager and said, I never learned how to lead people. And we as scientists also never learned in university when we were studying at the bench, the reactions, how to lead people. How did you take on this responsibility? It's a huge responsibility and a lot of fun as well, but how did you take on this part of the job?
There are many times when I would talk to, when I was in my people management part of my career, and I would have career planning discussions with young scientists, and I would say, well, what would you like to do? And they say, well, I want to be a manager. And I would say, oh, you do? Why do you want to be a manager? And the answer would invariably be some version of, I want to help people. Now, that's admirable, and that certainly is an important part of a leadership role. But I would then go on to ask them, what are the things you like about your current job? And what are the things do you not like? And they would usually talk about, the relationship with their projects, having control and decision-making over most aspects of their projects, or the role that data plays in helping them make decisions, the ability to really focus in on a piece of work. And then when they talk about the things they don't like, it usually had to do with, I don't like going to meetings, and I don't like the politics. And I would say to them, if you go into management, you're going to have to give up most of the things that you do like, and you're going to have to spend most of your time on the things you just told me you don't like. Because when you're a benched scientist, you are dealing in controllable variables. You are dealing with data and facts and making decisions based on a sound data set. When you are a manager, everything is gray. There's very little black and white. You're dealing with human beings who have their own hidden and very obvious agendas.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make decisions without sufficient data. It's a very different environment. And I would generally say that the people that make the best scientists usually make very poor managers. And that maybe, kind of half joking, I was a decent leader and manager because I was only a mediocre scientist. But all joking aside, I've always been interested in social science. Mm-hmm. What is it that motivates somebody's behavior? What is it that drives somebody to make a certain decision on an action that they're going to take, or a priority that they're going to make, or a decision that they're going to make? And what are the things that I can do to influence that behavior? And I think that we were talking about curiosity before being the underpinning of being a good scientist. I have a natural curiosity about people and what makes them tick. And when you start looking at leading and managing as, how can I get the most out of this group of people? How can I put them in the right environment with the right resources, with the right direction, so that they then can achieve the most that they can achieve? That's really what leadership is about. You are successful as a leader only when the people in your organization are able to achieve the most that they can achieve. It's not your achievement, it's theirs. So it's that kind of mindset that led me down that pathway.
That's a great statement. I'm also curious on people, and that's a very great statement. Perhaps also this analytical approach helps as well as a scientist of then later leading people, because I'm just thinking about other women in sciences who led a lot of people. So in the last century, Maggie Thatcher was the Prime Minister of the UK. She was a chemist. And, and today we have in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel. Mm-hmm. She is a physical chemist. So right. Is that coincidence? And they're both women? I thought that's very interesting, isn't it?
Well, correlation, causation, who knows?
Again, the very scientific answer. I like that. That's very, very smart. No, that's great. So you encourage with your role model behavior, really other women in science, young women, I would say, to make also this leap from academia to industry, and that this is really an environment where you can thrive and really develop other people, but as well as yourself. I think you also ran then finally operations also in South America. So you did a lot of various things, which make life so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have the opportunities that I had, as you were alluding to. I lived in Mexico for 3 years in the late 90s, which was really formative for me. It was most important for me as my development as a human being, but it was equally important for the career opportunities that I was exposed to during that and then after that time period. So yes, I've had a lot of great opportunities.
That's great. And another question that I wanted to ask you is, and I read it here right now, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself still being in academia? And then you are referring to a blog which you have just written. It's called A Note to My Younger Self, because you, Sherri, have a series of blogs on sherribassner.com. We will put the link below.
Thank you.
And that's a very exciting one. I read all the other ones of yours as well, but I love this one, I have to say. And perhaps even if it's not directly related just to wisdom, but the wisdom that you are spreading in this blog post is so valuable, I would say. It's amazing. So you give some advice in general to people, not only as for women in science, about being humble and finding your true authentic self. I think that's really key. When you're authentic, you can convince because it's not fake, it's real. I think that's amazing. Perhaps you want to elaborate on this blog post a little bit yourself, because before we come to the later paragraph, which I love the most, which is choose love. But before we do that, perhaps something that you wanted to reflect on, because I like this idea of you being right now in the position that you are in, talking to yourself, being 30, 40 years younger. How did you come about this idea also?
Yeah, well, thank you for those compliments. That means a lot to me. You know, when I started this blog after I retired, it was because I I just felt like I had a lot to say, and I didn't know who would read it besides, you know, my mom and a few good friends who I think are still reading. And you know, it's not this huge viral phenomenon, nor do I want it to be. It's a way for me to capture a lot of the lessons that I learned along the way, and a lot of the lessons that I've shared with mentees throughout my career. And you know, that the blog post, the recent one you're referring to, A Note to My Younger Self, was inspired by, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning of the blog, I have a number of important younger people in my life who are at real inflection points. And so to avoid the temptation to give them too much advice that they're not asking for, I decided to just give it to myself. But there's a lot of lessons that you learn by making mistakes. And the reality is that you can't learn from somebody else's mistakes. Maybe you can take some advice and try not to make such devastating mistakes, but you only learn from your own. And two of the key lessons that I learned throughout my career is that need for humility. And we were kind of alluding to that before by saying, always be curious about what other people can teach you. You don't know it all. You're never going to know it all. And you don't even know what it is you don't know. So be humble, stay open to the lessons that you can learn from other people, and you'll be a much better person for it. And then very much related to that is the need for authenticity. You know, when you're just coming out of school, when you're early in your career, you're proud of yourself. You should be proud of yourself because you've accomplished a lot. But there's a lot ahead of you. So you need to figure out what is it that makes you truly happy. Who are you really, and who are you not? You know, admit your own mistakes, look to learn. You know, that authenticity and the humility go hand in hand. And the people that I have admired most throughout my career are the people that can be authentic, that can say, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good at. And they surround themselves with people that complement their own strengths and their interests. So those, I think, are two of the most important messages, I guess, to my younger self.
Very good, Sherri. And you also said something about mistakes, and I think that's very true, and also is inspiring for the audience that we have on this video cast. I think when you said already early on that you cannot plan each and every step perfectly well, and the outcome might be different. So we all make mistakes, and we should embrace these. I also say, as a manager, as a successful manager, I make mistakes, but I admit that I make mistakes. I think a very good manager probably takes 80% of the decisions the right way, and 20% might still be wrong, whereas a mediocre manager probably has a 50-50 rate only, but they never admit. They come across as if they're 100% right, which is not the case. So when you most of the time take the right decision, you are already very successful. So nobody should shy away from taking a decision that they're not 100% sure about and might risk to make a mistake, and also in their career. I think that's very wise advice. And in
I think a very important point is that don't let any mistake go to waste. Yes. Learn something from it. What can you learn from either how you made the decision or how the decision was executed? What can you learn from that mistake that will make you that much better going forward?
Very good advice. Very good. And in the last paragraph, you say something which really moved me a lot, because it's such a, I've just seen that you are having the same experience that I have. So you're writing here, choose love. This is a message that you will learn from Dad. I'm in the same position. So I'm also, for me, the most important thing in life is love. And that holds true for personal life as professional life, because we have to love our employees, our clients, most of it, that's important. If we don't love our clients or customers, we cannot be successful. We have to understand their needs and fulfill them. Right. And my father also transpired that throughout his life, much more than my mom. And so it's interesting to read that you had the same experience. So he influenced you a lot then, I assume.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. And my father taught me to be kind to everyone, because you never know everybody's full story. You don't know what they are going through. It's, you know, again, it's tied with the authenticity and the humility. Be curious about people, learn about them, because as you get to know them and respect them and treat them with kindness, it'll come back to you tenfold. And I've never quite understood the behavior of people, either in my personal life or in my professional life, that felt the need to have a suit of armor on, that they had to be flawless, and they had to always treat other people as if they were one step below them. That never works. Think about how you react if you're treated that way. And just treating people with kindness, with love, with compassion, it will take you much further than if you take a harder line.
And as you said, it comes back tenfold. And you're giving an example here of a woman which approached you on Philly Airport, that you gave money to go home. And you never got this back from her, but probably indirectly you do, because she might take this gesture of kindness to other people. And then it might finally, 10 years later, 20 years later, I don't know, come back from other people who are related to her. And I recently had an experience, and therefore I couldn't believe that you're writing that, on Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, where a manager approached me in the business lounge. He also lost everything and didn't know how to get home. And he asked me for money, and he promised to transfer it back. Of course, he never did. So I gave him 80 euros so he could make his way back home. And I still feel fine about it, because as you just say, when you are kind, you somehow get it back. And that's such an important message, which I think holds true for everybody in general, every person, but also for women in science going forward, being authentic, love what you do, be passionate, as we said, and don't really plan each and every step, and don't always ask for getting paid back immediately. The payback might come a little bit later. Just rely on it and it will happen.
Right. And honestly, in many cases, the payback is just, it's an internal sense of, I did something good for somebody.
Exactly. That makes you feel better, and then you are a better person, a better manager in our professional world. Thank you so much, Sherri. It was a great pleasure talking to you. We will put your blog link down below on the website. Please visit our website of Wisdom. It's called womenin.science, or on Instagram, women_in_science. And thank you very much. It was a great pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity,
Bye.
Dirk. And again, thank you for all that Wisdom is doing to try to help young women in science.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.